Yeah, this is definitely a setback for Jack Smith, who had hoped to leapfrog the Court of Appeals and go straight to the Supreme Court. Instead, he will have to first litigate this matter in the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, in the meantime, since he filed this request with the Supreme Court, the D.C. Circuit has said they would hear the question on an expedited basis. They have set oral argument in the case for January 9th. If they decide fairly quickly, then we could be back at the Supreme Court maybe within a month or so, if the court acts quickly. Or it could be that they take their time and we don't decide the case until June, in which case the trial will be delayed by that amount. So I think the March 4th trial date, either way you slice it, is in some trouble now. That doesn't mean it can't be tried before the election, but I think we're looking more at a summer trial instead of a spring trial.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about some good news here regarding the Supreme Court and the Jack Smith Biden DOJ case against Trump regarding January 6th in the 2020 election, as the Supreme Court may be the last line of defense against Democrat tyranny that is a threat to our republic, okay? Our country is falling off a cliff, and we're hanging on because the Supreme Court seems to be the only institution in this country that still has some integrity, okay? And we'll see, right? We'll see whether or not they maintain that when it comes to hearing the case involving Trump being disqualified from the ballot in Colorado, okay, in which the Supreme Court is going to decide that if the 14th Amendment actually applies to Trump when it comes to the insurrection clause, which, you know, I think it's obvious that it doesn't, because Trump was not even criminally charged with insurrection. In fact, nobody on January 6th was criminally charged with insurrection, let alone was convicted of, you know, inciting an insurrection or being a part of an insurrection against the country. I'm not sure how you can remove somebody from a ballot for insurrection when they haven't even been criminally charged for it. Again, this is a precedent that is just terrible in this country. But with that being said, again, we have some good news here that has the mainstream liberal media in cope mode, right? As SCOTUS has rejected Jack Smith's request to hear Trump's immunity claim immediately. Okay, so here's what's going on. Trump currently is set to go to trial in early March in the Jack Smith case against him involving January 6th in the election, okay? And Trump basically says, no. I am immune from these charges, basically citing presidential immunity, okay? And this has been something that has been litigated in court at the beginning of the month by Judge Tanya Chunkin, because she denied 2 motions to dismiss this case from Trump's team based off the First Amendment and presidential immunity claims. So now Trump is appealing the immunity, and Jack Smith is trying to essentially speed run through the appeals process and filed a request directly with the Supreme Court asking them to immediately rule on the issue, okay? Arguing that the case involves an issue of national importance, aka he wants to be able to have the Supreme Court rule on this case basically immediately so that the trial against Trump can start, okay? And the trial can't start until the Supreme Court says whether or not Trump actually has immunity from the charges, right? So he wants the Supreme Court to rule on it now, and if they rule in his favor and say that, well, Trump doesn't have immunity, then they can start the trial, okay, and go ahead and get Trump in court and get a conviction. Therefore, Trump is convicted before the 2024 election. Basically, an obvious attempt, like a blatantly obvious attempt to try to affect the outcome of the 2024 election, okay? However, the Supreme Court basically killed their hopes and dreams by basically saying, no, your request is denied, right? Literally one sentence, your request is denied, okay? That's not exactly what it said. They said it in more, legal jargon, but I'm just giving you the layman's version of what they said, right? One sentence, denied, okay? So this is a big deal, because if the Supreme Court continues to slow walk this, essentially that pushes back the trial date. And the further back that the trial date begins, that means it's less likely that the trial will begin before the election, or they will have a conviction before the election, which is what they want, right? The whole point of getting a conviction is to try to sway the outcome of the 2024 election. And the Supreme Court is basically saying, nah, right? Nah. Slow your roll, Jack. Like literally slow your roll, Jack, is what the Supreme Court is saying. Okay, so without further ado, of course, the liberal media, again, they're in cope mode here. So we're going to react to CNN reacting to this news. Clearly, it's not news that they like to hear.
I want to go now to Joan Bostupik, because the Supreme Court, Joan, has rejected Jack Smith's request for justices to hear the Trump immunity dispute. Take us through this.
Yeah, Brianna, we just got a one-sentence order without any recorded vote or explanation. They have denied Jack Smith's request for immediate consideration of the claim that Donald Trump should be immune from criminal prosecution for interfering with the 2020 election, trying to disenfranchise millions of voters. The special counsel Jack Smith had laid out a case for why it was compelling for the Supreme Court to decide this sooner rather than later. And just a second ago, the Supreme Court denied it, again, with no recorded vote or explanation. It means that this case now stays in a lower appellate court. It could take now months before it gets back to the Supreme Court. It means that the trial of Donald Trump that was supposed to start March 4th certainly will not start on March 4th.
Again, hilarious, right? Absolutely hilarious. Okay, what's also hilarious is that the Supreme Court is definitely trolling. 100% they're trolling, okay? Because Jack Smith, in his explanation for why this has to happen, which is rare, by the way, it's rare for you to be able to just skip the appeals process like this. But, you know, this is what he's trying to do. He didn't really have a real explanation outside of, well, I need this to get done before the 2024 election. And he didn't say that exactly, but we all know that that's what he's trying to do, right? He didn't have a real legal argument for why it actually makes sense to grant this expedition of this, these presidential immunity claims, right? To rule on it. So again, the Supreme Court is trolling because they're just giving basically one sentence like denial with no real explanation, which in my opinion, I think is a troll because Jack Smith doesn't have a real explanation for why this is necessary outside of politics, right? I mean, I'm just saying, I mean, clearly this is politically motivated.
That is huge.
Yeah, so Joan, what we're talking about here is that this is now going to go through the normal appellate process, and it'll go to the Court of Appeals, and that process will play out, and then maybe it might go to the Supreme Court after that. But for all intents and purposes, this is a logjam, a legal logjam, I suppose, in the way of that March start date, as you were saying.
That's absolutely true. And Jack Smith, on behalf of the federal government, had said, Supreme Court, you're going to have to resolve this sooner rather than later. Please come in now to do this quickly. And the court has said no. As I said, no explanation. Just, obviously the implication is that Jack Smith, the federal government, is going to have to go through the usual hoops of the lower court. Now, that is what is standard procedure, but what the special counsel had tried to argue was that this case was so compelling, so important to have a former president held accountable for actions from the 2020 election. He did not invoke the 2024 election, but here we are right on the eve of that. And this trial of former President Donald Trump and all the related proceedings are just going to go right through to the summer. And who knows if it's just going to bump right up against the November election.
Hopefully it does, right? Hopefully it does. Again, this is hilarious. This is great. Okay, how things are working out. Again, it's just funny because Jack Smith is saying, well, it's so important. It's so important to go ahead and try the former president for what he did in 2020. So important. But why is it so important? Why is it so important to do it quickly? For what reason, right? What reason is it so important to do it quickly? What he doesn't really have an explanation outside of, well, Trump bad, right? Orange man bad. But they know what the real explanation, they know that it's blatant election interference. They know exactly what was happening here. So again, the Supreme Court has a very fascinating situation because again, the longer that they slow walk this, that means that the more the trial date gets pushed back, right? They could literally just decide that, you know what, we're just not going to hear this until, after the 2024 election, right? That way it has no bearing on the outcome of the 2024 election, which in my opinion is the right thing to do.
Let's remind people, Joan, what's at the heart of this, which is this question of whether Donald Trump had presidential immunity in his actions surrounding the election.
Yeah, the issue is that, Jack Smith had charged him with four felony counts, for the interference with the 2020 election, everything up to, the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. And what Donald Trump had said is that he should be immune from this kind of criminal prosecution because any actions taken were part of his official actions. And a lower court trial judge rejected that. said, essentially no one is above the law, especially the president, the former president in this case. And that was the situation that Jack Smith tried to emphasize, is that no one should be above the law, especially a man who tried to, defy the Constitution and perpetuate his time in office. You
know what's funny about that? They'll argue that Trump should not be treated special, okay? But yet they try to make a case. He's like simultaneously making the same argument that, well, Trump is special, so therefore you need to bend the rules for him, right? You need to grant this special exception for Trump and expedite this process because he's special. But out of the same side of their mouth, they're saying, well, we can go after him because he's not special, right? He needs to be treated like everybody else. Again, it's amazing how that works. Absolutely amazing. Yeah, so you see that, you heard that, okay? W for the Supreme Court, okay? And, here's the thing about the immunity stuff, right? Some people have argued that it's not a good thing if the court rules that Trump is immune, because that means that Biden would be immune from whatever, future charges he may face for influence peddling or whatever, if the GOP ever really can bring any real charges against Biden, which, hey, I wouldn't hold my breath, okay? I wouldn't hold my breath that Biden is going to face any accountability or responsibility or be held to the same standards that Trump is being held to. They're not going to do anything with a classified document case against Biden, so you already see right there that there's a difference, right? There's double standards in regards to justice in this country. So with that being said, again, the Supreme Court, W, let's hope and pray that we get a similar outcome in regards to the Supreme Court protecting our republic, right? Protecting our democracy when it comes to the Colorado case, okay? In which, again, they're trying to keep Trump off the ballot, trying to use the 14th Amendment to do that, which I think is kind of ridiculous considering how Trump or nobody involved with January 6th has actually been charged with insurrection. So we'll see. But until then, the mainstream liberal media has to cope with reality and the fact that, hey, this federal trial, this Jack Smith trial, which, this one's, could be the one that, they actually get Trump on. That's going to be pushed back. That may be pushed back further and could delay Trump actually getting convicted, which, again, this is what they want to do in order to affect the outcome of the 2024 election. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.